Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the broadcast today, Steve Yeager joins us. He's chairman of Assembly Judiciary. He's here for the whole show on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Safety. We all think about it. You think about it when he buckles in, when you check your mirrors and put away your phone. RTC thinks about safety too. In fact, we create it. Center turn lanes mean fewer blind spots. Bike lanes keep cyclists and you safe. Roundabouts reduce injury collisions, and all these crosswalks are designed to keep families like yours safe. Safety is your priority, and it's ours too. Every day, in everything we do.
Retail's impact on Nevada's economy? Enormous. 8,600 businesses, large and small, employing 145,000 workers. And last fiscal year, retail paid tax on nearly $60 billion in sales. We're the Retail Association of Nevada. We support retail, we help it grow, and we mean business.
RANNV.org.
Pro Group Management is the place where companies can find workers' comp solutions that are designed to meet their specific business requirements. As regulations evolve, Pro Group takes a proactive approach to clear the path to make sure your business stays ahead of the curve. Knowing your workers' comp program is optimized, you can focus on other important matters related to your growing business. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're delighted to welcome back to the program Steve Yeager. He's the chairman of Assembly Judiciary. And we were talking just a couple of weeks ago after the first special session. You promised you'd come back after the second, and here you are. So thank you for that. Let's start out by talking about this committee and cash bail. Can you explain to the folks what cash bail is and what this committee is trying to get accomplished?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks again for having me, Sam. It's always a pleasure to be here. It seems like a long time ago I was on the show, but I know it was only a couple of weeks ago. That's how quickly things have moved. But essentially, there's an interim committee to look at cash bail. And what cash bail means is when you are arrested, charged with a crime, oftentimes the judge will set a cash bail, which means if you can either try to post that money, meaning if you have the actual cash, you can take it to the jail, or someone can post it on your behalf and you get released, or you can use the bail bonds person, which basically requires you to come up with like 10% of the cash bail. You pay that to the bail bond agency and they come up with the rest of it. And essentially that money sits there. And if you make all your court appearances, that money gets refunded to either you or the bail bond agent at the end of your case. So there has been a nationwide movement to look at cash bail because, as you might imagine, a lot of times a standard amount gets set. It doesn't really take into account who you are and what your financial situation is. So, cash bail might be very easy to post for somebody who is wealthy, but someone who is living paycheck to paycheck, there's really no chance that they'll be able to post that cash bail. So this committee is looking at making potential recommendations to the legislature about how to change that system and hopefully result in a more equitable system. For instance, in the federal system, almost nobody gets cash bail. You either get released or you don't, depending on whether you're a danger to the community and whether you're going to show up. In our state system, it operates a lot differently. A lot of people get cash bail, and that's kind of the only thing that they get and the only chance that they have to get out of jail while their case is still pending.
All right, so if you get rid of cash bail, what's the incentive for somebody to actually show up to court?
Well, I don't think the recommendation is to entirely get rid of cash bail. I'll say that initially. I know some states have done that. I think the movement of this committee is to have cash bail be a last resort. So if there's like no other way that you can guarantee someone will come back, you could set a cash bail. But I think the incentive for the defendant, I mean, obviously you're going to go through your case, and to the extent you are convicted of what you were charged with, a judge is going to make a sentencing decision about whether you should be on probation or whether you should spend time in jail or prison. And I think think your history of whether you show up to court is going to make a big difference. For instance, if you show yourself to be responsible, you come back to court, you take care of your business, I think a judge is much more likely to give you a chance at probation versus if you're someone who just doesn't show up and they have to come arrest you every time, it's very likely that judge is going to send you to prison because the judge is going to believe you will not be successful on probation. So there is an incentive there just in terms of the ultimate outcome of the case.
Does the judge already have this discretion?
Yes, the judge does have the discretion now. There was a recent Nevada Supreme Court case that kind of changed the way some of this works from a procedural standpoint. So I think one of the issues before was judges were kind of just defaulting to cash bail. And I saw it when I used to practice in the system. Judge would just say, well, you're charged with this crime, so your bail's $10,000. And there's always been a requirement under the law that there be a more individualized assessment. You know, what is a person charged with? What is their connection to the community? What is their financial ability to post bail or bond? And that really wasn't happening the way it should have been. So I think part of what this committee is doing is trying to make our statutes a little clearer, because it does say the judge needs to make that analysis, but it's really unclear about how that happens, whether it's the district attorney who has the burden of proving you need to be in. Because a lot of times you just show up and the judge would just set the bail and that would be the end of the discussion. There's really no back and forth. So part of what the committee is trying to do is to give judges more guidance on precisely how to do this.
You know, the district attorneys, once again, do not seem real happy with these potential changes. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think the truth of the matter, and this comes from my experience, I spent almost 10 years in the criminal courts here in Las Vegas. If someone is in jail, they're just much more likely to plead guilty to the crime they're charged with. Because if you start to think about, you know, if you were in jail for even a couple of weeks, you're going to lose your job. You're probably going to lose your house. You're not able to take care of your obligations and provide for your family. And so, you know, I think the district attorneys have much more leverage in that situation, because if they offer a negotiation to somebody that says, hey, we'll release you from jail if you plead guilty, you know, that's really, really hard for someone to pass up if they've got things going on the outside. And, you know, I'm not saying that that's why the district attorneys oppose it, but I think, you know, that's sort of the unstated thing in the justice system. If you're in jail, you're going to get a much worse outcome for your case. And, you know, obviously it's easier, I think, in some sense for district attorneys if the person's in jail, because they don't have to worry about them showing up to court either. And, you know, deep down, I think there are some district attorneys who like the direction this is going, but, you know, change is always difficult. We've been practicing this way for a long time. And whether you're talking about changing the process in court, that's a change for district attorneys, it's a change for judges. So there's always just that opposition, that people want things to stay the way that they know them and they're comfortable with.
So does this point out the weaknesses in the public defender system, that the leverage is so much on the DA side?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not sure I would say weakness in the public defender system, other than one of the difficulties with the public defender system is you don't get appointed really to represent someone until you walk into court and that person's already in jail at their first court appearance. Versus, you know, if someone hires an attorney out in the community, they might have 2 or 3 days to prepare before they go to that initial court appearance. In the public defender world, that just doesn't happen. I mean, you show up, you meet the person for the first time, the district attorney gives you the file, and you're trying to look at it as quick as possible to make whatever arguments you can make to try to get the person out. So there is a disadvantage there in terms of being able to collect information and make the best argument to the judge. And I think part of what this committee is contemplating is maybe trying to move that hearing a little bit to give the public defender time to get some of that information, because a lot of times you're just relying on, you know, what your client tells you in court, and you don't have any way to confirm that. So that definitely is a weakness in the system. And then, as you might imagine, you know, if you have a public defender, you don't have money, because you don't get a public defender if you have the means to hire a lawyer. So many more public defender clients end up staying in jail because they can't post the bail. And, you know, I've seen cases where the bail is $500, which means they only have to come up with $50, and they can't come up with $50. A family member can't come up with $50. So this is an issue that I think impacts public defender clients much more greatly than it does those who have private attorneys.
You know, one of the things that's come up during these hearings is a situation that many conservatives have complained about over the years, which is public employees serving at the same time in the legislature, and that causes conflicts. Does that concern you in this case once again?
It doesn't concern me in this case. I mean, if you look at the legislature, and I guess you can have a debate about whether we got the model right in Nevada or not, but we have a citizens legislature, and I think the idea there was you bring the experience from the real world to the legislature, and we're not professional politicians who are divorced from the impacts of our decisions. In terms of public employees, I mean, I think we should want prosecutors and defense attorneys to be serving in the legislature, because those are people that have firsthand knowledge of how things work. Now, I think, again, you have to be able to leave that at the doorstep and make decisions and take votes that maybe are contrary to what your employer would like. But you have to do what you think is right. And so I, for one, think that it's a good policy to have. I mean, I get it that depending on the issue, people are always going to complain, well, you work for this company or you have this conflict. But the conflict of interest rules are very specific. Unless it's going to personally benefit you or a family member in some way that it wouldn't benefit the general public, you are allowed to vote on it. But all that being said, I get the frustration, but this is the citizen legislature system that we have, and I haven't heard anyone advocate that we should be full-time professional politicians. So for now, this is the system that we have, and I certainly don't blame folks for wanting to bring their real-world experience to the legislative building.
Okay, and one last question on this catch-bail situation. Would changing the system save money for the public by people not being incarcerated? Because the cost of incarceration obviously is quite high.
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, at least in theory it would. Staying at the Clark County Detention Center, which is, the large jail down here in Las Vegas, I mean, it's upwards of $170 or $180 a day. Now, obviously, there are fixed costs that you're not going to save. But, you have medical care for those folks. And really beyond that, I just think when you think about the impact of being incarcerated on somebody, I mean, if they have a job and they lose that job, and all of a sudden, them or their family members are turned out to the street, they're evicted, there's social costs that really hit taxpayers in terms of our social safety net and taking care of those folks. So it's more than just the cost of actually keeping someone in jail. It's all those attendant costs. So, if we can keep someone out of trouble, have them come back to court, keep their job, that is going to be better for everybody involved in the system, because that's a less of a burden on the social safety net that we have here in the state.
And you bring up a good point, and for another day, but recidivism is, and the cost of it, and that we don't address that when we release people from jail is such a huge area, in my opinion. But let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll look at the 30-second special session right after this timeout.
Because of UMC, I'm putting my free time to good use.
Because of UMC, she keeps me on my toes.
Because of UMC and this guy, I'm here.
UMC, the highest level of care in Nevada.
Can't do it. Stupid, like my mom.
We can't do anything at Mommy's because you won't pay child support.
Dad said you cheated, and he's not even sure he's my dad.
Mommy said you left both of us, so she isn't gonna let me see you. I look just like my father.
I'm divorce attorney Marilyn York, and I may represent men, but hate has no gender, only casualties. Please, stop sacrificing your children in your war against your ex.
The signs and symptoms of cataracts can start out small with subtle changes in your vision. So don't wait. Be proactive and take your vision into your own hands. If you're experiencing the onset of cataracts or just have questions, contact your eye care professional or call Eye Care Associates of Nevada today. Dr. Hiss has years of experience specializing in the surgical correction of eye disorders and has completed over 84,000 vision correcting procedures. At Eye Care Associates of Nevada, we'll change the way you look at the world.
Hey, Dad? Are you learning? This place is great. Huh? You gotta try this.
Wow, this stuff is great. People are gonna love it.
Yes. Yes, they will.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with Steve Yeager. He's the chairman of the Assembly Judiciary Committee. Steve, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I wanted to read from the editorial in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. The headline was, Nevada's 32nd special session, a true low point. Democrats ran the show in Carson City with a large majority in both houses, and Governor Sisolak in the State House. They bear full responsibility for what may have been the worst legislative gathering in state history. Perhaps the only positive to emerge from this fiasco was that Democratic lawmakers, having once again prostrated themselves in service to their government union benefactors, can no longer enjoy even the pretense that they have the slightest concern for private sector taxpayers. Sir, your turn.
Well, I'm sure that headline helps sell some papers and get some clicks online, but I would disagree with that. And you know, looping back to what we talked about, Sam, I think some of the frustration for the special sessions, both of them that we had, is this idea of change. I mean, it didn't look like a legislative session, right? The building was closed to the public. We had to take testimony by phone. It was a little more difficult to participate, although in some ways it's easier to call in. But I think there's some frustration there because, you know, there are folks that are normally in the building and they sort of feel like they have a sense of what's going on, and that was taken away. So I think from the outside, I understand that frustration, but I think we did a really good job in the two special sessions, particularly the one we just finished, in really coming up with policy that was good for the state of Nevada. Now, am I going to tell you that that policy was perfect? By no means is it perfect. And that's one limitation of a special session. I mean, in a regular session, we would have had so much more time to vet these proposals, to work with folks. It's just not possible in the context of a special session. So I think, you know, the governor sets the agenda for the special session. He puts it in the proclamation. I think we went there and we accomplished what was asked of us. And I think, you know, speaking for myself and my colleagues, I think we all were thoughtful about the votes we were taking. They weren't easy. I mean, a lot of these issues were very controversial. But to somehow suggest that the one or two sessions were a failure, I think just really misses the mark and probably just reflects more of a frustration of how the session operated procedurally, which was, you know, largely out of our hands in a COVID world. I mean, what are we going to do? We can't operate like we normally do. So I think that's where some of the frustration came from.
Well, some of the other frustration I would have to throw in there was, you know, votes being taken in the middle of the night. You know, sessions not starting until late in the evening, the inability for any kind of real public comment, people being limited to just a couple of minutes, mining not being notified of what was about to happen until minutes before it actually occurred, and then having no time to respond. So I think there's a fairness to be able to look at this and go, and plus the bigger issue is what was there that couldn't have waited until the regular session when there would have been more time and all the things that you're saying weren't available would have been available come February.
Yeah, well, I dispute a couple of those things. I think mining was informed. Maybe they didn't get as much time as they would have liked to, but it wasn't minutes before the hearing. They knew about it hours before. And, you know, the legislature's in session. Folks know that things are dynamic. They change quickly. You know, I think ideally we wouldn't have started hearings so late, but sometimes we're just behind the scenes or there's drafting of bills that have to be done. And so, you know, we're trying to be mindful of a couple of things. One, the governor has called us into special session and asked us to address certain issues, which we're certainly trying to do. But then, you know, we don't want a 3 or 4 week special session either, which is going to come at cost to the taxpayers. And as I mentioned before, we are a citizens legislature as well. So don't forget that those serving have day jobs that they had to leave for several weeks at a time. Now that's part of what you sign up for, but I think that's a consideration as well. I mean, we're not working. So, you know, I think we did as best as we could. And again, the governor is the one who sets that agenda in the special session. I think some of what you saw us accomplish, particularly in the social justice bill, took into account exactly what you said, which is some of this was just not going to be possible in a special session. So I think we were able to pass what was possible, what was attainable, and there's certainly still work to be done. And I'm hopeful that when we get to February, we'll have something that looks more like a normal session of the legislature. But your guess is as good as mine in terms of where we're going to be as a state and a nation in terms of the pandemic come February of 2021.
All right, let's take another break and we'll come back and we'll hit social justice right after this timeout.
Dimitri Prine here for Design Outdoor. Come visit Design Outdoor's store and backyard to see our wide selection of fire pits, barbecues, and pizza ovens, natural stone water features and fountains, and frost-proof pottery. Our store and backyard are located at 11600 South Virginia, just north of DeMonte Ranch Parkway. Visit designoutdoor.com or call us at 851-9499.
One of the most psychologically damaging things parents can do to children in divorce
is disparage one another, which is why I can't believe I even have to make this commercial. Half of your kids' genetics come from this person you're spewing hate about. Your children have the right to love you both, but more than that, they deserve to love themselves.
Marilyn York might be a men's rights divorce attorney, but this is for every selfish parent. Shut up.
Hi, I'm Dave Newman. Remember me? I used to be the house detective, and now I'm a realtor full-time at RE/MAX Realty Affiliates. A lot of people ask me, how's the market? You know what? It's fantastic. If you're even kicking around the idea of buying or selling, give me a call. Let's talk about it. Call me at RE/MAX Realty Affiliates and just ask for the guy who used to be the house detective, Dave Newman.
Everyone is talking about opioids, but they're not the only drugs that can be harmful if taken in large quantities or not as prescribed. You also need to be aware of side effects from anxiety drugs, muscle relaxants, sleep aids, and stimulants. Mixing prescription drugs with other drugs or alcohol can be dangerous. If you take Ambien with a glass of wine, it may be enough to stop you from breathing. Prescribed drugs can be just as dangerous as illegal drugs. Take medications only as directed.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with Steve Yeager. He's the chairman of Assembly Judiciary. So again, reading from that editorial, it said, tepid police reform legislation whose primary purpose is to protect a legislative leader who faces a tough re-election fight. If any topic deserves serious discussion and reasoned debate, this is it. Instead, Democrats ran through two bills in an effort to deflect attention from the fact that last session, at the behest of Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro, lawmakers sanctioned legislation making it more difficult to discipline police officers. You want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that editorial is kind of looking at two different bills and I think trying to combine them, and they were not combined. So the one I worked on was Assembly Bill 3, which is the so-called social justice bill. And I think we accomplished some really good things in that bill. I mean, we banned chokeholds. We're starting to collect data. We're requiring officers to intervene when there's excessive force. I mean, these are meaningful steps, and I'm very proud that Assembly Bill 3 was bipartisan and received wide support in both houses of the legislature. And, you know, while some may call that tepid, I think what you see in Assembly Bill 3 was an effort to work together to say what can we agree on, realizing that there are some bigger issues that are going to take more vetting next session. So I think there will be additional legislation, but Assembly Bill 3 I thought was meaningful. Obviously, it didn't go as far as some folks would have liked, but again, that's a limitation of the special session. And then the other bill that's referenced was a Senate bill that I think was spearheaded by Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro, and you know, it was a partial repeal and some changing of a bill that she brought last session, and a bill that was also widely supported by the legislature. So in terms of, you know, what her thinking process was there, I mean, you'd have to ask her, but I think, you know, upon reflection, there were members of the legislature who felt like that bill last session may have gone too far in limiting the ability to really hold accountable cops who were not acting appropriately in the field. So, you know, I understand, again, that might not have gone as far as people would like, but I still think in terms of a special session, we made progress that was meaningful and the progress that was attainable. Will there be further discussions? Of course there will.
And to point out that she does work in the DA's office in Clark County. We're running out of time here. We've got about a minute and a half left. Secretary of State has put out some thoughts on ballot harvesting. Do you think that her points are valid? Because a lot of people have concerns about this at this point.
You know, I don't think so. I mean, they like to use that phrase, ballot harvesting, but the way I see this, it's a convenience issue. I mean, you know, you can take your neighbor's piece of mail to the mailbox now and it's fine. So in a COVID world where there are people who literally cannot leave their houses, would not feel comfortable, being able to take their ballot and deliver it either in person or to the mail, I think makes a lot of sense. We have criminal penalties in the bill. So if you commit to doing that and you don't do it, or you have some kind of fraud there, which again, we've had 0 cases of fraud in Nevada, it's a category E felony. So it's not as if with impunity you could say you were going to do something different. So, I imagine Secretary Sagaski's in a tough spot because she's getting a lot of national pressure from folks who I think see the best path to victory in 2020 as limiting the number of people who vote. As legislative Democrats, we thought it was very important to make sure that we had a robust system, and I think that's a bill that certainly needed to be done right away to make sure that folks have the ability to vote by mail come October, really, and into November.
But Secretary of State Sagaski has really operated that office in a bipartisan fashion. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that she has concerns and raised them.
Yeah, look, to her credit, she absolutely has been bipartisan about it. But when you look at how the primary ran, which again, that was a decision that came from her office to run the primary by mail and to give even inactive voters mail ballots in the primary. And there was no concern expressed then. And then we move forward now. And, there's some opposition coming from her office. And I just can't help but think there's been some national pressure on her. But I don't doubt her motives. I think she's doing what she feels is right. I just don't think the additional protections that she asked for are warranted. If we had felt they were warranted, we would have put those in the bill initially. But, I don't fault her for asking, for sure.
And that's where we have to leave it. Always a pleasure to have you on the program, sir. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And we'll be right back.
A bird's eye captures its surroundings at different heights. At Brian Culpa Photography, we can make your imagination soar over buildings, parks, cityscapes, and beyond. Brian's images tell the story and get the job done. If you need a new perspective to tell your story, contact Brian today. Brian Culpa Photography. Experience the bird's eye view at brianculpaphotography.com.
Kenny! Dad? Are you learning? This place is great. Huh? You gotta try this.
Wow, this stuff is great. People are gonna love it.
Yes. Yes, they were.
As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's development company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Pro Group Management specializes in providing industries with the necessary components to satisfy and exceed workers' comp requirements. Every business has unique needs and specific regulations. Pro Group Management stays ahead of the curve, providing up-to-date services to keep your industry in top form. Discover how we simplify your tasks, improve efficiency, and reduce expense to keep you moving in a positive direction. Pro Group Management. Workers' comp that works for you.
Watch Nevada Newsmakers on YouTube. You can do that now these days. We'll see you on the next broadcast.